Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the College of Complexes here on Saturday, January 31st, 2026. Looks like this is meeting number 3,853. Do a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off the program. I want to first of all thank Charlie and Tim for both helping us on the production end of things. Thank you very much for the both of you. Tonight we have a very hot topic to discuss tonight, but I want to give a preview for everyone else that may want to look towards the future here. Tim has passed out some of the leaflets talking about what's going on tonight, what's coming up in the future. It's also at the collegeofcomplexes.org website, which Charlie maintains as well.
Charlie will be going over all that too, don't worry.
Okay, Charlie is going to be going over all that. But, I want to make certain that we all understand that we're getting pretty slim in the speakers. So any hot topics that you have coming up or any topics that need to be discussed here at the college complexes, we're looking for those speakers to fill out our schedule.
Contact me or contact Charlie.
Thank you, Tim. So just for the record here, contact either Tim or Charlie to schedule those speakers.
Are the numbers on here?
Yeah, Christopher Fogarty.
There should be some numbers there for Charlie. And if you look, the schedule's on the next few pages. Go ahead.
All right, a couple of rules that we follow here. There is a $3 tuition payable to Tim before we take off for the evening. And there is also a requirement that we at least order a bite of food from the lovely staff here at Dapper's East to make certain it's worth their while as well. Only one fool at a time is pretty much our easiest one to follow, but rarely ever does seem to get to be
One
adhered
fool
to.
at a time and no personal attacks.
No personal attacks. That's the other rule.
That means I can't call Charlie a chump.
Well, don't call Charlie a chump. He's the one who makes this all possible, so we need to be thankful to a degree anyway. So without further ado, we're going to jump into this evening's presentation.
There's announcements first. Announcements first.
What announcements do you have, Tim?
We have Charlie and then anybody else.
Okay. So before we get into tonight's program, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Charlie for any announcements that we have.
Okay, Charlie, go ahead. Let me get the speak that I gotta get the.
All right, welcome again. Welcome again to meeting number 3,853 of the College of Complexes, the playground for people who think. And we have the schedule on the screen. Scroll up. Although I'm not a capitalist, I will give an advertisement for upcoming programs. Next week is February the 7th, and we will be featuring an activist, a lifetime activist who had a march across America and was engaged in other activities. So it's a recap of some of his activities. He was in the state legislature of Iowa, member. So February the 7th, be methods of protest, a review. Transitioning after that, our next program will be on February the 21st, and our special President's Day program will be, it should be an open discussion on how to remove a president. How to remove a president. Okay, moving up then into March. Professor Lichtenberg is going to be discussing philosophical topics, theology. He's going to talk about the God question and arguments for and against the existence of God. And he has a brief outline there of his arguments. The next program then will be on March 21st. Tim Bulger will be talking about democracy and how America learned to treat losing as an act of war. Okay, that's it for the open date. Got a couple open dates. Looking for an Earth Day speaker. If you know of any eco groups, I'd put them in touch with me. Okay, Tim, thank you very much. And Chris, take it away.
Okay, we're going to be going about twice a month after this month, just because we're not getting the volume of speakers we used to. But It'll probably be the first and third Saturdays of the month. Please keep an eye on the schedule because there will be more speakers coming in. Does anybody else have announcements? Jan, you got an announcement? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I want to read it if you'll give me just a chance to get it up here. I'm sorry that I don't have it ready. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can just, okay, here it is. I want to read this because I'll forget. Elizabeth Tynan will be the Nuclear Energy Information Service speaker on Night with the Experts, Thursday, February 26th, 2026, at 7 p.m. Central Time. Ms. Tynan is the author of 3 books that explain the politics and outcomes when the British colonized Aboriginal lands for the purpose of nuclear testing. Those 3 books are Atomic Thunder, The Maralinga Story, and The Secret of Emu Field, and Montebello Islands, but that one is brand new and it is not yet available. Ms. Tynan will present at the Night with the Experts this title, Dangerous Games, British Nuclear Tests in Australia. After which there will be at least a half hour for questions, discussion, and getting acquainted with the speaker. If you want to receive an invitation with a registration link, write to me, janbudar1@gmail.com, or Dave Kraft at neis@neis.org. And I'll put this in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we've got another announcement here from
Yeah.
Ellen Crowley.
Yeah, hi, Ellen Corley. Yeah, I want to say that I want to make a living amends with Charlie Paddock and work with him to get speakers here. I know lots of speakers that I can get. So let me work with y'all to book tons of speakers. There's no shortage. I don't think we can't afford to go on a bi-weekly basis because there's issues and there's speakers. We just have to get them through to you guys. Okay. Thank you.
How about mentioning your candidates?
Oh yeah. And one was, yeah, I'm running for office. So I would like to be a speaker on these. One week is for, 5th district. I'm Congress and, so let's give me the opportunity to speak more in depth. We're going to be organizing all sorts of, debates and things coming up, so if I can't speak here, where can I speak, right? So thanks so much for people like Christopher Fogarty, and a lot of the people here who supported me in trying to go public and promote myself and get the name recognition out there. I've learned a lot from this College of Complexes about how you have to dare to speak out about issues. And, but we need the forums and the platforms. So let's not lose this one. Thank you.
Okay.
All
right.
Okay, thank you for that announcement. And I guess I'll go ahead and make my announcement as well, even though I'm chairing the meeting. I'm actually running for office as well. I'm running for Cook County Commissioner in the 8th District here in where we stand is in the 8th District. So
Cook County Commissioner of what?
8th District.
In the 8th district.
All right, very good.
So that being said, without further ado,
You're already on the police board now, aren't you?
I am.
What is your role there?
Police District Council. I'm the chair for that council.
I'm the head of the Libertarian Party in Illinois. It's Travis.
It's a busy year for me. All right. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and welcome our featured speaker this evening. I'd like to welcome up to the podium Stansfield Smith. He's an expert on Central and South American affairs, and he is here to discuss the U.S. military actions to overthrow the Venezuelan revolution.
Give it up again for Stansfield Smith.
All right. Well, even Stan.
That's not
Stan, it's good to see you back from Venezuela, Stan.
I was in Nicaragua, not Venezuela, but okay. I had Charles asked me if I wanted to revise it. I would revise the title that U.S. military action fails to overthrow the Venezuelan revolution. That is what happened. Now, well, I've been to Venezuela 3 times. The last was 2019 for an election. I was going to go in December, but U.S. was blocking flights there, so I couldn't go. So the U.S. has been trying to overthrow the Venezuelan, the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela, started by Hugo Chavez, ever since they passed the law nationalizing control of the oil state, taking it out of the hands of U.S. corporations and putting it in the hands of the people. Then, since then, Venezuela has been a target. And the U.S. wants to put an end to the popular revolution there and take back control of the oil, which Trump, as we know, says actually belongs to us. Actually, his photo in the White House, Venezuela is part of the United States, along with Canada, where I grew up, which that's not going to happen, and also Greenland. And who knows what else is on this list? Venezuela's oil is reserved.
That's him. He's already started, which irritates the snot out of me.
What's that?
Can you speak into the microphone?
No, he that was
I'm not speaking into the mic.
You are.
You are.
Before I get into this, there's an old quote I read from Henry Kissinger that is accurate. It says, control oil and you control nations. Control food and you control people. Now, I know from studying the Arab Spring that happened when the U.S., which controlled their food supply in Egypt, jacked up the price made them pay a lot more for wheat, which caused protests in Egypt. Also, like we have oil in Venezuela illustrating that issue. But the U.S. has been trying to overthrow the Chavista revolution through over the last 10 years in particular, through an economic blockade, assassination attempts of the president, terrorist bombings that have repeatedly over and over and over, armed mercenary attacks by U.S.-sponsored troops mercenaries coming out of Colombia, seizure of Venezuela's wealth overseas, which is, I think, amounts to about $22 billion that the U.S. has seized or frozen, U.S. and the European Union. And now the U.S. has had a military attack on the country and kidnapped the president, Nicolás Maduro, who's in New York right now in prison. But the U.S. economic blockade on the economic warfare on Venezuela was the most destructive, which began towards the end of Obama's term. Once, it seems like as soon as Obama said he would restore relations with Cuba, he declared Venezuela a national security threat to the United States, and he began the economic blockade on Venezuela that drastically increased under Trump. Now, about 100,000 Venezuelans died in the years between about 2016 and 2020 because of the U.S. blockade, because they could not get even oil, they could not get food, they could not get medicine. So all these people, that's by the Center for Economic and Political Policy Research, that did a study of how many extra people had died during those years, and it came out about 100,000 just in 4 years, which is more than the U.S. and Israel slaughtered in Gaza in their 3 years, right? I mean, I don't know how many buried under the rubble, but that's how murderous the U.S. economic blockade was on Venezuela. To give you another figure, I just read today that before the Chavistas came to power with Hugo Chavez in 1999, the malnutrition in Venezuela was 21% of the population. But after 10 years, once the Chavista took control of the oil and started using it to benefit the people, the malnutrition rate went down to 3% by 2012. So it went from 21% to 3%. But then with the U.S. blockade on the country, the malnutrition rate went up to 32% from 3% in the space of 6 years. That's what the U.S. was doing to that country, which they say they're doing it for the freedom and democracy of the Venezuelan people. So that's basically from 3 out of every 100 people in Venezuela suffering from malnutrition, it went up to 32 out of every 100, thanks to U.S. interference. But even this U.S. blockade on Venezuela has failed because in spite of the blockade, Venezuela's economy has been growing for the last 5 years, every quarter, and it's continuing to grow. But to get into why I say this military attack on Venezuela was a setback for the U.S., first, the U.S. had to recognize that with all the troops they had in the Caribbean, they could not invade the country. They could not invade and win. Because soon as the U.S. started sending a lot of ships and warships and everything to the Caribbean, Venezuela started organizing more and more people into their national militia and training people in the national popular militia to fight if there was an invasion. In 2 months, they had 6 to 8 million people in their national militia that were ready to fight the U.S. invasion. So that would just end in another U.S.-style Vietnam War that the U.S. knew it couldn't win, so it forgot about invading the country. But Washington also had good grounds, because since the U.S. is a superpower, it has economic power, it has military power, and it has political influence all over the world, and it can put a huge amount of pressure on a small country. And usually when it does that, it often causes divisions in the leadership of that country, and then the U.S. has an opening to go in and do something. Like they did that in Burkina Faso, they've done that, they did that in Grenada, there's probably all sorts of examples where it wasn't an invasion that actually made the revolution of some government fall apart. It was just putting so much pressure on the leaderships that some of them start looking for a way out. But Washington was unable to do that with the leadership in Venezuela. Their leadership stayed together and united, and the U.S. could not manipulate them. The third thing I'd say they did, the U.S. military attack was a setback for the U.S. is that the attack accomplished nothing for the U.S. All the U.S. did was remove the president, kidnap the president. He didn't trump whatever he says. He did not choose to put Delcy Rodriguez in as president. Venezuela has a constitution like we do, and in the constitution it says if the president cannot serve, the vice president becomes the president, the interim president. And she is the vice president of Venezuela, or she was. So it was the normal constitutional process of Venezuela that once Nicolás Maduro was locked up in the jail in New York, that the vice president became the acting president. That had nothing to do with whatever Trump did, except for kidnapping President Maduro. But that's just some spin he tries to put on it. And another thing, usually over the last I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years, whenever there's been protests in Venezuela, there's always opposition protests in the streets. A lot of often violent opposition, like we just saw, well, in Iran, it was more extreme recently. But there was always opposition protests against something the government was doing. But now we see there was, after the U.S. went in there, there was no opposition to the Chavistas protesting in favor of what the U.S. did or in favor of Maduro being seized and taken to the U.S. There was just no opposition whatsoever to the government and the revolution like there had been in the past. So that's also another defeat for the U.S. because even in 2024 they had pretty big protests, and now this time there was nothing. And I think also the U.S. is going to face a legal defeat with their trial of Maduro. As you can remember, probably all year long, they were talking, Trump was saying that President Maduro is the head of the Tren de Aragua. No, there's two of them. I'm mixing them. Cartel de Solids. Yes, that's what he was in charge of. And he was repeating that all year long. And he was saying all the Venezuelans here were part of this big strategy when President Maduro had to send these people into this country and cause crime and disaster and wreck our life in the United States. So we had to round up all these Venezuelans and deport them. But now, in the very beginning of the trial, the U.S. said, well, actually, there is no cartel de Solis. That doesn't exist. So the main reason they had for getting them, they had to admit, was just fabrication. And another crime that they're trying to trial Maduro for is possession of machine guns, which is kind of... Yes. The U.S. is telling a president of another country that they cannot possess machine guns. I don't know what's going to happen in this trial, but I do know that the lawyer who is defending President Maduro was also Julian Assange lawyer in Britain. And I do know from following the case of the Cuban Five that eventually it blew up in the face of the United States. They had to release them because so much pressure just came out how fraudulent the charges were against them. And there's so much pressure on the U.S. government that they had to release them in an exchange with Cuba. And then on top of that, the U.S. had to go recognize the government of Cuba, even though they didn't want to. So that ended up being backfiring in their face. And I think this is going to happen now with Venezuela having a trial of Nicolás Maduro. But maybe the most interesting thing about this case is the extent to which the U.S. government and the U.S. media tried to confuse people about what was happening in Venezuela. It's very similar to how they tried to confuse people what was happening in Nicaragua in 2018 when there were these violent protests in the streets. Or what was going on in Iran recently, which they try to say were peaceful protesters against the government when actually they weren't at all. And they were also backed by U.S. and Israel, these protests. Or the kind of stories we heard about the war in Ukraine. I remember I spoke here 4 years ago about that. In March 2021, couple of weeks after the war started. Mm-hmm. And we were all being told that this was an unprovoked assault by Russia on Ukraine and that Russia was planning to conquer Europe. And I said that was all a bunch of baloney and that this whole war was provoked by the U.S. and NATO to get Russia in a war so it could divide Russia. So that was another kind of story that the U.S. made up about that. Then of course, we have the one that we can. At the time when I spoke here, and I don't think too many people here agreed with what I was saying, but maybe you do now because it's kind of clear that Russia is not taking over Europe. And then the one I guess we all agree upon is that story we all heard about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction, which is we all know is bogus. So the U.S. did go to a great extent to which they always do all the time, is to get us all confused about what was actually going on in Venezuela and what the U.S. actually did there. Now, what happened January 3rd when the U.S. went in there? They had 200 special troops and 800 helicopters and 150 planes overhead and a lot of military drones, and they went into Caracas, and I think they were there for about 2 hours early in the morning, and they seized Nicolás Maduro, and I think they were going to seize some other leaders, but they didn't.
I guess they take his flag.
I think from what I heard that she thought the U.S. troops were just going to kill her, so she got in the way. That's what I heard, but I can't substantiate that from anything. That's why they took her. But as I said, there's all the psyops around this campaign, which is it's probably the most interesting thing about this is how the U.S. government and how the U.S. media tries to manipulate people into believing things that are just false. And it's really, they do a very excellent job at it too. It's very professional. It is. It's like a highly skilled thing that they do to get American people to go along in some invasion and war. Because you just think about it, it's like, you can't just go into some other country because you don't like the president and go kidnap the president. What if somebody didn't like President Trump and wanted to like some other Canada or Denmark? Said, if we don't like Trump, let's go into Washington, D.C. and kidnap him.
Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Well, plus also it's like there's no court case against Nicolás Maduro in the International Court of Justice. He never got turned over to the International Court of Justice. Like, that's what you would do if the president of some country is guilty of some crimes. You don't try him in your own courtroom. But some of this propaganda, which I heard over and over for a long time, I'm sure you heard it, that the U.S. said it chose Delcy Rodriguez to be the new head of state. That is just completely false. It was the constitutional process of the country that made her the new president. She also did not relent to any pressure by Trump. She has always called for negotiations with the United States based on mutual respect for national sovereignty, which has also been the historic position of the Venezuelan government. And it's also the position of Cuban government, Nicaraguan government, Mexican government. It's like, we will talk with you based on mutual respect for our joint national sovereignty. So that you don't tell us what to do, we don't tell you what to do. Venezuela has also not agreed to any oil deal like Trump says. In fact, Chevron was always, they export oil from Venezuela. They 200,000 gallons a day, mostly, have for several years. Trump said that he has a special deal that's like Venezuela is going to give him 30 to 50 million barrels of oil but I mean, if you add up 30,000, 200,000 barrels a day that the Chevron is exporting that goes to Texas or New Orleans, I mean, you get that 30 to 50 billion it's already happening. He's just making that up. And in fact, Venezuela has always said that they're happy to export oil to the United States. They'll sell it at market prices. Like, there's no problem making a deal. But it was always the U.S. that tried to block it.
Trump want it for free? Or
Does
Trump think he wants it for free? Does Trump thinks it's his? Ours?
Well, I think now I was trying to find out more information on this, but I can't really. That since the U.S. military, the Navy is blockading their coast, and they're seizing a lot of oil tankers, and they're just taking it. I think, though I'm speculating, that no one is really coming to the aid of Venezuela in this. There's no Chinese or Russian or any other Navy coming to help defend Venezuelan tankers. That I think they made some agreement with Trump that, yeah, we'll sell the oil to you, and you give us a % of what it is that you sell it for, which is better, I guess, than Trump just taking it. I'm not sure how accurate that is, what's going on there. But I do know that, I don't know, it's been like 8 or 9 or 10 oil tankers that the U.S. seized. I don't hear that they're doing it now. So the other fake news we hear about this is that Delcy Rodriguez betrayed Nicolás Maduro, who was the vice, when she allegedly told the CIA how to get him and turned them over. But that is just a made-up story by the CIA. She did say that there were Zionist undertones to the attack on Venezuela January 3rd when they seized President Maduro, which is true. The Citgo oil company, which is a Venezuelan oil company, which the U.S. confiscated from them back in 2019, was recently bought by Adelman, one big Zionist leader in the United States.
Wow. Same one that gave Trump all the money?
Huh?
Marie Edelman.
The Israeli, yes, it's Paul Singer.
Paul Singer? Oh.
Same thing.
I've also read that the U.S. attack on Venezuela was to save the petrodollar, but I don't find that very convincing, because petrodollar is not really in bad shape. Plus, the countries that sell oil outside of the U.S. dollar, petrodollar started when the U.S. went off the gold standard, and Nixon went to the Arab countries and said, look, you sell all your oil in dollars and nothing else, and not your own currency, and we'll back you up militarily if there's any protests or anything against your government. So these countries said, yeah. So since the early 70s, if you wanted to buy oil in any country in the world, you had to get dollars to do it. That was the petrodollar. Now, some countries sell oil outside of the petrodollar system, but that's Iran, Venezuela, Russia. Those are the main ones.
BRICS, isn't it? The BRICS?
No, well, they're not all oil. So why are Iran, Russia, and Venezuela selling oil outside dollars? Because the U.S. sanctions those three countries and doesn't let them sell oil using the dollar. It blocks that trade. So if it was really a threat to the petrodollar, the U.S. say, well, okay, we're going to lift our sanctions on your country, and you can go sell oil in the dollar. And then You don't need to invade Venezuela to make them do that. Should like to mention also, probably you aware of that, like a lot of Americans that even like I was listening to John Mersheimer on the Judge Napolitano show, is that he said that this what Trump just did in Venezuela shows that the U.S. Constitution and international law are just out the window. The U.S. government's not obeying the U.S. Constitution anymore, and not only Trump, not only executive, but the legislative branch is not doing anything about it. So there's been almost no opposition in Congress. There's like the president goes kidnaps a head of state of another country, and like people in Congress don't say much about it. It's also, flagrantly in violation of international law. Another point I'd like to make is how this operation against Venezuela is connected with ICE and what ICE is doing around the country. Because I don't know if you will remember, but when ICE first started and when they started rounding up people, this happened simultaneously with Trump talking about Venezuela and drug cartels. The two things are intimately connected. And what we see, the kind of operations that the ICE is doing more and more, is getting pretty similar to what the U.S. did in Venezuela on January 3rd when they invaded. It's just, it's a smaller scale here, but it's all over the place. We see it all the time. They're just shooting people in the street, and then the government says, well, these are domestic terrorists when they shot that woman in the face. She was a domestic terrorist. The other guy, well, I guess he was a domestic terrorist. They just call anybody they don't want to get rid of a domestic terrorist or a drug trafficker. And what's really happening about it? Who's going to court for about it? Who's being tried for these kind of murders? Nobody's. Just saying, like with Venezuela. So these attacks on immigrants and the attack on Venezuela began basically simultaneously, and they're part of the same kind of operation. But I would like to talk a little bit about Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, which I've been to before, and they're all part of this alliance of Bolivarian countries in Latin America. Now, these three countries that are all very poor, though Venezuela isn't as poor as the other two, they have instituted a lot of social gains that we do not have in our country, even though we're the richest country on the planet. So it'd be interesting to ask, like, why is the richest country in the planet not able to do these things when these poor countries can? For instance, all three of them have free preschool for everybody. And not only free preschool, but all three of them have free education through college, not just through high school. Through college is free in all three of these countries. But here, no. Preschool costs a fortune and college costs a fortune. All three of these countries have free health care for all. We don't have that here. Now, why the richest country in the world, they can't do that? All three have government food programs, so really no one goes hungry. Well, we have some food programs here. All three of these countries have eliminated illiteracy. All three of these countries provide housing for the people. There's no housing. You can go to these countries, you don't see homelessness like you do in the United States. Even though you have rich people with multiple homes in different cities, you still have all these homeless people around. And so why is it that the richest country in the world cannot provide basic housing for people? Obviously, doesn't want to. Now, Venezuela has built 5.1 million homes for people over the last 15 years, which is going to be about 20 million people, and their population is about 30 million. We have Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying these three countries that have done these achievements for these people, he says that they are, quote, enemies of humanity. So what does that mean when the Secretary of State, who I guess is going to run for president, thinks that countries that provide these kind of services to people make them enemies of humanity? I would like to mention, since we're in the United States, and I'm sure someone's going to ask me about democracy in whatever country I'm talking about. Venezuela has had 31 constitutionally mandated elections since 1999. They've also had 7 national referendums, which is more than one a year, obviously. None of these were ever canceled due to U.S. war threats, the U.S. blockade, or any internal disorder. There's never any canceled election. The Chavistas lost a referendum in 2007, and they lost control of the National Assembly in 2015. But they did not dispute the results when they lost, just like Trump disputed 2020 and Hillary and everybody disputed the results in 2016 when Trump won. But the Chavistas did not dispute any of the results of the elections. The opposition, they've disputed every election and said it was stolen from them. The opposition in Venezuela, except for those 2 elections that they won, they do not dispute that those were valid elections. All the other ones they lost were not valid. Even Jimmy Carter declared, quote, Venezuela probably has the most excellent voting system that I've ever known.
Oh my God.
The U.S. election system is one of the worst. Besides that, Venezuela has 49,000 communal councils, which means every neighborhood has a community council which decide how they want government funds spent in their neighborhood. They take votes on what projects they want the most urgent projects in their neighborhoods for the government money gets spent on, and then they make sure they get to carry that out. And we don't have anything like that here. Now, I guess maybe I could go. If you're wondering about what President Maduro in New York says about the new leaders in Venezuela now, because the U.S. has always been trying to make them as divided. He said, they said that they trust in Delcy, the team at the helm. Well, this is from Nicolás Maduro's son in Venezuela. A message from his parents who were locked up in New York. He said they trust in Delcy, the new president, the team at the helm, and in us. This is the message they sent to us yesterday. That was on January 12th. As to the new president, Delcy Rodriguez, she has a 79% approval rating nationwide. 95% of the people in Venezuela in a poll said that they oppose U.S. aggression against their country. And 91% of them said that Venezuela should unite behind Delcy Rodriguez while this crisis is going on. Now, recently, the Venezuela has just, as I said before, when the U.S. blockaded, they froze Venezuelan assets overseas, like Citgo Oil Company. They just froze, the U.S. froze all its assets here. Now the U.S. is unfreezing them. So Venezuela is getting access to some of this money that the U.S. froze in banks in U.S. and in Europe, which is one of the new things that the new president has done, is to get Trump to make those kind of deal. Now, I could talk some about social gains in Venezuela and other things, but maybe I'll wait for you to have questions. But I would like this one thing I read by Alan McLeod, if you ever look at Mint Press News.
Yeah.
He wrote something. He said, this is one of the most extraordinary and illuminating passages in all of journalism. CNN frames Maduro as a paranoid liar for claiming the CIA is trying to overthrow him. Yet in the very next sentence, it casually notes that the CIA did, in fact, overthrow him. There's a level of cognitive dissonance and imperial brain rot you must have to write this, and then have it read by an editor and be published is truly breathtaking. Well, they quote from the CNN thing. It says, for years, Maduro cast the CIA as a convenient bogeyman, repeatedly accusing the agency without evidence of attempting to topple his regime as he clung to power despite U.S. opposition. Now, the CIA has helped supplant Maduro and is poised to help actively manage the Trump administration's dealings with Venezuela's new leadership. So it is kind of, I think one of the things most remarkable about this whole Venezuela thing is that the extent that they make up stuff and their ability to do it and to get people to think like it's normal, it's okay, it's legitimate, it's really amazing. That's an amazing skill. If you ever think, well, how can
By way of deception.
I just remember, I wish when I was a little kid and I didn't do my homework and I'd tell the teacher something, if I could spin stories like the U.S. is able to do and get people to believe it. It's amazing how much they control our minds. It's really worth how well they do it. But I guess, will you have questions now?
It's okay. All right.
Give it up for Stansfield Smith.
All right.
Okay, we're going to move into the question and answers portion.
All right.
So we're going to call him back up here.
Kelvin had the first question. Go ahead,
Okay,
Kelvin.
we'll hear from Kelvin first. So Stansfield.
Yeah. The question I do agree with you that upon the sovereignty of other nations, including Venezuela, however dubious you might think the person's claim to be in power, or whether tainted those elections might be, and I totally agree with you on that. The question I want to ask is, why would you extend the same rights to Venezuela and not extend them to Ukraine? You know, and please do not use any arguments that basically amount to, look what you made me do.
That you want me to say, why wouldn't
why is Venezuela's sovereignty supreme and Ukraine's not?
Why Venezuela should be free?
Why is their sovereignty why should their sovereignty be respected when you do not respect the Ukraine sovereignty?
Well, I don't think the U.S. and NATO are respecting Ukrainian sovereignty. They're using
Ukraine and NATO are not
with Russia. There's like, you people all get slaughtered, so we don't have to send in our own troops to do it.
Yeah, but it's not
like
it's not NATO hasn't invaded Ukraine. Russia has. Russia is the one that's sending the bombs over there and killing people.
Yeah.
So why is that NATO's fault?
The U.S. started that. It's
Oh,
been
well, in that case, the Russians started it in Venezuela and the Chinese started in Venezuela for selling oil to them or buying their oil. This is ridiculous. You can't say that one nation's sovereignty is sacrosanct and another one is bullshit.
You can listen. You don't take my word for it. You can listen to what is it, Jonathan Sachs? Is that his first name? Jeffrey Sachs. You can listen to John Mersheimer. You can listen to a lot of people who are scholars, not like who go into how the U.S. did all these things to lead up to the war in Ukraine and how it gave Russia
basically which basically boils down to the excuse of every abuser around the world. Look what you made me do.
They used the Ukrainian people as pawns to.
The Ukrainian people didn't invade anywhere.
Okay, thank you for your question there, Kelvin. We got a question here in the room. So just for visibility's sake, I'm going to monitor all the questions in the room, and Tim's going to monitor our online ones.
All right.
So, question back over here.
Loud, please.
I moved. Thank you very much, Stansfield, for a very, very researched, well-researched, and appreciate it. I have just two simple questions. The first is, reportedly, 7 million people have left Venezuela. It's like 20% of the population, I guess. Why did they leave?
Well, that was during the blockade at its worst, when I said malnutrition went from 3% of the population to 32% of the population. 100,000 people died when they didn't have health care and food and all this. So they were, like, you couldn't live under that circumstance. They got driven out. And
not a great testimony to the government, management of the government taking care of the people. I mean, despite the blockade.
Well,
the country takes in $17 billion in oil. But I got one more question.
But I tell you, the government income, they used to get $60 billion a year from oil, and it went down to about 600 million. Well, so that's like 1% of what the government had a couple years ago, they now have because of the blockade. So if you want to blame the government, you ought to blame the U.S. government for doing it, not Venezuelan government.
I understand. My figure was 17 billion and 25. But one more question. As you know, in the 70s, 75 to 80, Venezuela was one of the richest countries in South America. And they were producing 3.5 million barrels of oil a day. Quite different from today. What do you attribute that to?
Well, the U.S. I mean, they were doing like $2.5 million a day. 2.5
million barrels.
2.5 million barrels a day, maybe.
Today. So why has it gone down so much?
Before the blockade, it was 2.5 to 3 million. And then it went down to about, I don't know, went way down to a few 100,000. Okay. But that's from the U.S. That's the blockade. You can't have the U.S. doing this to. I mean, you might as well, like, since you were talking about Ireland before, you say, well, how come the Irish are not feeding themselves in the 1840s when they grow all this food? And then it's like, I don't see the U.S. is exporting it all. I mean, Britain is.
I agree that the blockade has a lot to do with it, but I don't think it's a single answer.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Patrick O'Hara, you're online. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I visited Venezuela in 2020. I was there for 3 weeks. I watched Juan Guaido get kicked out of office. And I saw online earlier today, China no longer is getting any oil at the moment from Venezuela. But getting back to this other thing, the U.S. has backed 50 fascist governments. And our man from England somehow thinks now the U.S. is on the correct side of a war. Are you sure?
I didn't say so.
I
I
assure
did not say that. I said, why is Venezuela's sovereignty sacrosanct and Ukraine's isn't? It was the hypocrisy I was pointing out.
About hypocrisy, okay, but there is a NATO proxy war where Ukraine is the bastard stepchild, and they were killing Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine for years.
Yeah. Well, you best not disagree with that, otherwise you might fall out of a window.
Guys, the point.
All right,
Guys.
fall at a time.
Okay, we'll take this up during the rebuttal period. Patrick, thank you very much for your question. Who's next online? Okay, Stan, I got something for you. Why is it the USA is always at fault in these foreign wars?
Always it.
It seems like you haven't. The USA is always at fault. Russia did nothing wrong for the violation of Ukraine's sovereignty.
Well, I didn't say that.
And then, of course, Venezuela's down because of the blockade, when we all know that it was because of the corruption in the oil company. Can you please explain?
I didn't say that Russia was.
Okay, I'm maybe being a little facetious, but just please clarify yourself a little bit. Because it seems to me that the U.S. is always at fault.
We are at fault.
Well, the U.S. is always interfering in other countries. That's what they do. That's what the CIA does. That's what other country does. Like, if you want to look at what countries in the world overthrow governments in other countries, can you say, like, how many foreign governments has China overthrown?
Oh, right. They've done a lot of it. I mean, look at
Where? Name one.
Tibet, for one.
Was part of China.
It is part of China.
No, no way.
What about? I don't know.
How about this? How about Russia with its recent invasion of Georgia?
What country? How many countries has China invaded in the last 45 years? How about Russia? I mean, those are the three powers. I mean, Russia has invaded some, its neighbors that used to be part of the Soviet Union.
And that
Outside
still
of
justifies
that,
invasion?
do they overthrow governments outside of that Soviet Union era, or they have drone strikes on countries all over the world? Or does China do that like the U.S. does? I mean, look at all these terms of coups and of foreign wars and drone strikes and assassination on other foreign leaders. And you can make a long list of how many people the U.S. has killed in other countries and compare it. I mean, it's the U.S.
All right.
Thank you for your question, Tim. This young lady right here has a question.
Even aside from making comparisons about, why is the U.S. always at fault when other countries are at fault, that's a false equivalency. Because if you look back at all of the actions since the Vietnam War, the U.S. has been engaged in internationally illegal criminal actions around the world, either through economic sanctions or lawfare or direct invasion, and the CIA has been at the forefront of a lot of these actions. So it should not be unusual to see a pattern of the U.S. malbehavior, and you continue that, and you assume that the excuses that are given in our media is called propaganda to make us. And I see the same stories recycled over and over. Aren't you all getting tired of the same storyline? It's always the same thing. But I have a question about why this action in Venezuela, because from what I have read is President Maduro had conceded to negotiating with Trump over everything. We don't have a regime change in Venezuela. What do you think was the point of this military action? Was it to, like ICE and the targeting the bombing of these boats? Is it to strike terror in the hearts of its enemies? I mean, what do you think the end goal was?
Distraction from the Epstein files.
So we have it on the record, so and everybody understands, including those online, because you were a little low in volume there. So
it's okay.
No offense to you. Yeah. You want to come and ask on the mic?
Ask it on the microphone. Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, come on up, and we'll be more than happy to.
Is this fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
This is really humbling because I'm a singer and I don't have that. I get enough breath support. But anyway, so what I was asking Stan is, based on the evidence that we have that President Maduro had expressed a willingness to negotiate with President Trump over all issues of concern, oil and whatever else might have been on the table at that point. And we do not have a regime change now that Delcy Rodriguez has assumed the presidency under their constitution. We don't see that the oil companies are lining up to start going after this, what is sour crude in Venezuela. It has very limited usage. And right now we don't have, and Venezuela doesn't have the infrastructure to really ramp up their production on that oil to make it more widely marketable. So given all of these issues, that it seems like there was a huge expense involved in the U.S. actually executing this huge armada and the drones and the Air Force. I mean, it was like performative art, the way this whole coup was done, or the kidnapping, I should say, of Maduro and Celia. So my question is, between that and the bombing of the boats, was the motive, you think, just to strike terror in the hearts of U.S. enemies so that they would be more amenable to negotiations?
Enemies and friends.
And friends.
Right?
Trump can win the Peace Prize.
Would you could we have the introduction of that lady? Who is it that just spoke?
HJ.
HJ.
Yeah, but where does she sing? And let's find out who she is.
I'm sorry, what's that?
What did she say?
Well, I mean, she said she's a singer, and we don't know her name, and I'd like to know more about her. Let's have her introduce herself.
When my album comes out.
Well, she said she'll launch an album on this platform.
All right.
What?
So,
what did you say?
You're asking me to speculate,
Yeah.
right? Which I don't really want to speculate. But
You should go up there. Okay.
I will say I don't think it wouldn't have looked very good for Trump and his base and his international prestige if he just withdrew the ships and everything and they all went home. He didn't change anything whatsoever in Venezuela. So he did something that makes it look like he did what he was planning to do, even though it actually didn't do anything. But then the media just sold it as this big victory. So I cannot say. I was wondering when they were sending all these ships there, I was like, so what are they going to do? They can't invade Venezuela because they couldn't win. And they would need hundreds of thousands of troops, and it would take for a long time. And nobody got, 70% of the U.S. population was against going to war in Venezuela. So it's like, I was like, what's this guy doing? Why is he doing this stuff? What's his plan? So people don't know. But then he did that thing, and then he had an out. Grabbed Maduro. Didn't change anything, but he had an out. Like, oh, I accomplished what I was out to do. Maybe that's what it was, but didn't change it. It's just a safe-facing thing, maybe.
Okay, we have Charlie next. Go ahead, Charlie.
We got a question.
Yeah, Sam, good talk. I just had a question here. Do you know what the Iron Curtain is? And how did countries come to be situated behind the Iron Curtain? When we were growing up, there was all kinds of talk about the Iron Curtain. How did countries come to be situated behind the Iron Curtain? Wasn't it invasion by Russia?
What?
Oh, invasion by Russia.
Were they not invaded by Russia? Every single one of them?
This is what I remember when I spoke here 4 years ago. You were saying, well, Russia's communist now. And I say, hey, Russia hasn't been communist since 1990, which is now almost.
Stick to the thing. How do you get behind the Iron Curtain?
What
It was
the Soviet
Each of
Union.
those countries was invaded, were they not?
How did it begin? Well, the Nazis went and invaded Eastern Europe, and then the Soviet Union, and then the Soviet Union ended up defeating the Nazis basically by themselves, basically. And they drove them out of all those countries of Eastern Europe and also out of Germany. And then that's how they ended up where they were in all those countries.
So they sent an army in, right?
Yes, there was a war going on, and the Nazis lost that war.
Did they not send an army and occupy those countries?
Yes, you'd be hard to win a war without sending in an army. Yeah.
All right.
What?
So they took those countries and never left? They never
What?
left. They never left for 50 years.
Yeah, this is kind of like it's history, and it has nothing to do with Venezuela and the United States.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Okay. We do have a question in the chat and it's related to this lady here. One of our members from the chat wants to know where you sing at. You said you were a singer up there.
Yes, currently I'm singing with a chorus called Voices of Hope Community Chorus. It is a chorus that does fundraising and support for breast cancer survivors and their families and friends.
Are you at a current performance venue right now or not?
We perform, have a spring concert coming up. We perform in Glenview and Oak Park.
You have a website.
It's called Voices of Hope Community Chorus, yes.
Okay, so Voices of Hope Community Chorus, everybody. And I hope that
we have a marvelous show.
Okay, now back to our questions. Go ahead. Ellen next. Ellen, you're next.
I'm kind of a question comment that, in summation of what we've gotten to here, but think about what Charlie just said. My conclusion is there's a war on communism that is still being waged by an invisible fascist empire. They use the divide and conquer thing, and they use the CIA, the Mossad, and so there is a commonality. I think that a lot of people, like Charlie, seems to think that Russia, the communists, are still going after the other. That we need the national security and NATO and CIA to be offsetting them. And I think that's one issue that you did a great job, maybe clarify more that, we need, like Luke's question was, what was the economy like in 1972 in Venezuela? And then you get up to the sanctions, and then you get up to now. And I don't know, how are we going to stop this abuse of power by the CIA and the banks and the capitalists, the fascist capitalists, who are, it seems like it's terrorism to me. Okay, so the question is, are we this is Operation Gladio, was to gradually bring about a global military police state using psychological operations, false flag, terrorism. It seems that Trump, it's like, he really says he wants he wants to win the peace prize by doing this. And
okay, what's your question?
Well, so I guess the question is, just Venezuela, the context of, I don't think it's the corporations. I think that so much of all our global events have been driven by the dollar, by the banks, protecting our own political monopoly. And how can we stop it? I don't think anybody else has. And I'm interested in Stansfield, tracking this.
Is there a question
as
here?
a person, you followed it.
Come on.
It's a trajectory different, or it's kind of the same thing you've probably seen for years. This false flag attacks on us just to keep America scratching their heads. Is it getting worse or better, and how can we stop it from a journalistic perspective and propaganda?
Well, it's hard to stop it unless we have to make a media that's independent of the corporate media. That's basically one of the best ways. And you'd have to read different sources in alternative media. It's sometimes people learn that, you know, they get tired, they realize they're being lied to. And then they don't believe it anymore. I mean, the government doesn't have much credibility nowadays, but people still will fall for a lot of the propaganda. I mean, I know like leftist people who say, no, I don't trust the corporate media. They always lie. But then they'll repeat these things about Venezuela that are just like this corporate media propaganda. There's no basis for it. You know, they'll still believe it, even though they say, I know they're always lying, but this time I believe it. I don't know how to explain that too well. They'll never tell you the truth about stuff. It's just.
Are they deliberate? You think they are
Yeah.
the CIA, the media, the New York Times?
Point of order.
But let me go back another thing when I talk about blockades. Like, when the U.S. blockades a country, the U.S. owns the world financial system. So if the U.S. wants to, like, stop you from spending money, you cannot go anywhere, basically, on Earth and spend money because they're going to block you. They can block you using a credit card out in, I don't know, China. They can control it because they own the whole system. And any transaction, it goes through the SWIFT system. And as soon as they see some transaction by some person or some country, they can block it instantly. They can just shut down. U.S. is not like some other country. They run the whole international financial system and the banking system.
They're
Okay.
using their power.
All right, hold on.
So,
Kelvin, you got the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've listened to you talk, and we've discussed the reasons for Trump's action in Venezuela, which I don't condone and I don't support, despite what the man said before. But you've not mentioned that at any time the old deal that Venezuela made with China, and which is a real motivation for the incursion.
What? Well, the deal that Venezuela made with China.
Yeah, the deal Venezuela made with China, and that was the real reason for the incursion.
We talked about this.
well,
Good question.
if Venezuela is a sovereign country, it can make deals with other sovereign countries, and they don't have to go to the U.S. to get approval.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that.
If you want to be friends with somebody, you don't have to get approval from like me to be friends with them. You can just do it.
Unless that other person happens to be Vladimir Putin. Well, it's okay for Venezuela to do what it wants, and I've got no problem with that. But you say it's not okay for Ukraine.
But thank you for your question there, Kelvin. Do we have any other questions here in the room? Right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I kind of want to get your reaction on the idea that Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua are kind of these benevolent actors that are just victims of U.S. imperialism, which I do believe to some extent. But in the Venezuelans, the Cubans, the Nicaraguan people that I've talked to, I think a lot of them would push back on that, and they would put a lot of blame on their own government. Things like La Lista de Tascón, which was predating any U.S. involvement in their economic affairs or anything like that. And those were people who went on to become the first refugees from Venezuela. They were being targeted by the government. They were being harassed by Maduro, by Hugo Chavez. So the idea that, they are purely at the whims of the U.S., that they're just victims, there's a lot. I think it invalidates the refugees who were here well before these 7 million people. What would you say to these people who have experienced all this, these threats by the Venezuelan government? I guess my comment is, I don't see the U.S. as the only bad actor here. There's so many documented cases, refugee cases all around the world, of Venezuelans being persecuted by Maduro and the Chavez regime. So what are your thoughts there?
Good question.
Well, you don't really give me any examples that I would know of, so I could respond.
Somebody repeat the question. We couldn't hear it here at home. I couldn't hear it.
Okay, okay, so the question that was asked, and I'm sorry, what was your name, sir? Colin had asked, basically the situation, of course, there's a lot of blame to be laid upon the U.S. government, but what about the governments of Venezuela and some of the outlying countries that have persecuted their own people to where they've sought refuge here in the U.S.? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and the example is La Lista de Tascon. That was before any U.S. involvement. Major U.S.
I never heard of that. When was that?
Lista de Tascon. So Hugo Chavez, there was a referendum.
Wait, actually, Colin, could you come up here? That way the people online can hear you as well.
Yeah.
All right. The Lista de Tascon was a referendum on Hugo Chavez back in the early 2000s. The people who signed that document to have him removed, they were persecuted in their public life as Venezuelan citizens. They were denied housing. The 5 million houses that you talked about were generously given to the citizens. They lost that housing. They lost their place on those lists. They lost government jobs. A lot of the Venezuelans who are here under the TPS status, which, you guys, Trump just got rid of, they were here because they were persecuted. So this idea that the Venezuelan government is innocent, I think it's false. So
could you ask your question?
Yeah. I think a lot of Venezuelans' position right now is of its own making. The way it's treated its citizens, the way it's run their economy.
All right, just so if you're new here, we will have a portion after the question period where you get a certain amount of chance to do a rebuttal. Okay? And thank you very much.
Well, because I say that Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua provide health care to their people and housing and food and free education, that doesn't mean I'm saying everything about these countries is just great. I'm just saying that these are things that these countries have but are poor, and we're a rich country and we don't have these things. That is not saying that everything that their governments do is just great. I didn't say that.
Were they persecuted?
Well, I know a long time ago, there was a recall referendum to recall Chavez, which I don't know, must have been about 2005 or 6 or 7. But I don't think it got on the ballot, so it wasn't a vote. Now, I don't know much more about that. And I know that obviously the U.S. backs the right wing in those countries, and the U.S. right wing wants to get rid of those governments in those countries, and they can get violent, and you have to put them down. You can't let them be violent.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
I mean, it doesn't
Okay.
mean that
Question on.
I'm
got-
approving of everything that they do, but I mean, that's,
That explains.
I
Okay,
can
okay.
do that.
All right,
It's not my
Patrick
business.
O'Hara, you're next. Go ahead. Patrick, you're online. You got your hand raised. Go ahead. Unmute, Patrick.
Mr. O'Hara, could you unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, Patrick, we're waiting for your question. You're just saying who owns the narrative, sir? You gotta unmute.
You might not have a microphone.
He does.
Hey, spoke on.
Patty, you're on mute.
Patrick, I mute everybody during the most of the time when they're not up, so unmute your please. We can't hear you, Patrick. Can you please unmute?
Move on.
All right, we'll move on then. Charlie, go ahead.
Yeah, Stanley, I've heard you say repeatedly, don't believe any of the mainstream media like the New York Times or Washington Post or I read the publications out of the U.S. Congress and the Hill and things, but I spent 40 years in the government and I ain't ever came across any agency that was in charge of controlling the U.S. media. How does the U.S. government control the media? What agency of the government does it?
Well, I didn't say the U.S. government controlled the media. I think it's the same people who control the media also control the U.S. government. It's the same group of people. Some of them have the job in the government, and some of them have a job in the media, and others are in the industry, and it's kind of. Now, I'm not. I don't know why. I remember I got in a lot of arguments. You're talking about violence and the government doing stuff. When there's a crackdown and a lot of these January 6th protesters here in Washington, D.C. got sent to prison. I didn't support that. I'm not that I'm a Trump supporter, but some of them, I mean, they just went into the Capitol buildings. Why were they thrown in prison? What'd they do? I mean, there's all sorts.
They didn't do anything. They
I'm
broke
not-
into the U.S. Capitol.
I know some of you are like, yeah, they should have been locked up. But I'm just showing you, it's like to some people, this person is like fighting for freedom. Another person, he's a criminal or a terrorist. Now, so it kind of depends on your politics. I mean, you can get a few people like Glenn Greenwald who are more like, well, so what actual criminal thing did these people do? And I think he would say that a lot of these protesters on January 6th who went into the Capitol, there's no reason that they should have been in prison.
All right, well, thank you for the question.
Okay, who else has a?
Okay.
We have a question over here, Ellen.
Yeah, I like what, building on Colin's question of, I think our perception, have you ever, what perception management is that, the Maduro was bad and Chavez was bad. They're communist, right? And I think that's kind of what's behind the CIA's, narrative, psychological operation is to portray them as bad. We're good, so we'll take over, right? And but I was kind of interested. Did they try to kill Chavez? I mean, my sense is that they gave him cancer, and where does international law come into this? I think we have to prosecute our own rulers of the empire.
Okay,
So apparently what I'm gleaning is your question is who holds them accountable?
Yeah.
Okay.
For this divide and conquer.
Well, that kind of takes way off the subject, but I should say I don't is we as U.S. citizens living in this country, we should be focused on what our government is doing with us who live here. What some other government does in some other country with their people, it's not our business. It's up to their people in that country to take care of their own business in their country. It's not our business. Our business is here. Like, we got enough problems. We got a lot of problems here. We got homeless people all over the place.
Is this a Zionist kind of, I mean, are they manipulating this whole game like the devil's chessboard?
Point of order.
Well, I don't know, but it's not very easy to. We ought to get somewhere where we're like, other countries have a right to decide who they want to run their country and how they want to run their country, and it is not our business. Our business is our country. We don't want some other country telling us that we don't like what the U.S. government is doing, and maybe we'll start bombing the U.S. or maybe we'll kidnap the president. We would all be outraged if that happened, whether we like the president or not. That's
Jake, you're online. Go ahead, Jake. Unmute. Jake?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. Thank you for your talk. Now, my question is, Trump didn't like Maduro. He got rid of he kidnapped Maduro and his wife. Why didn't he allow Machado to take over the country afterwards? She was the rightful winner of the election. Instead, he placed Maduro's vice president in charge. Why didn't he allow Machado to take over?
Oh yeah, Karina. Well, her person that she ran for president, she says is rightful. Not her exactly, but she didn't win that election, or he didn't win that election. The results of that election, 2024, there was a presidential election in July, and there was 9 or 10 parties, 10 or 11 parties running for president.
Oh.
And the two leading ones, I guess, were Machado's candidate and Maduro. And at the time, both of them said they won. So it went to the Supreme Court of Venezuela. And the Supreme Court says, you bring in your evidence showing that you won. So, and then we will make a decision on who's the legal, legitimate winner of the election. So Maduro went in and presented his evidence, and Machado and them did not even go. They just didn't go. They didn't present any of it. They just didn't go. They didn't go. So you're asked to go. You're fighting to be president, and it goes to the Supreme Court, and here you are, you're invited to go, and you don't even go. What does that tell you?
Would you go if you were going to be in front of a firing squad?
That's not a Supreme Court is not a firing squad. But Trump said that Machado was not popular in Venezuela, which is why he didn't want her to be president.
Right.
So what does that tell you? It's like that he knows what the real story is.
All right. All right, we got a guy over here answering a question yet.
Do you want to come up to the mic?
So about 20 years ago, a teacher took about 20 students down to the School of America in Fort Benning, Georgia. You don't hear about that anymore, and that's where we train all the military people from Texas south to Argentina that were trained by our people so that when we wanted something to happen, they were there for us. So whatever happened to them? I haven't.
School of Americas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go to those protests. They were very good.
What would they do at School of the Americas?
Well, they train, U.S. trains military leaders in Latin American countries.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
To torture the.
They They renamed it.
Communist.
Okay,
I don't know what, it's not called School of Americas anymore. It's renamed.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing.
at this point, Shirley, you've had repeated questions. Jake, you've had repeated questions. Is there
Yeah,
any-
I had a follow-up question. Yes. No.
Okay, Jake, you've had repeated questions. Go ahead.
Okay, can I speak?
Last
Can I
question.
go ahead?
Last
Okay, my question
Jake.
is, yeah, this is a follow-up question. If the Venezuelan Supreme Court turned down Machado, who appointed the people to the Supreme Court? If Maduro appointed all the people to the Supreme Court, then they're essentially his puppets. They're enrolled in his favor.
If that would be, you saying that about the U.S. Supreme Court too?
No,
You're
I'm saying what?
When the U.S. does it, that's okay. But Venezuela does the same thing.
No, I'm not. I'm not comparing the two. I'm saying.
I know you're not.
I'm saying who. I'm not comparing the two at all. I'm saying who appointed.
Jake, we're gonna have to cut this quad line off.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Get us into rebuttals. What?
And I've got Luke as well.
All right, so go ahead. We'll get two more questions. No more from the audience, Jake. No more questions, Jake. We're gonna take.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
All right.
We got
Luke.
I'd like you to comment. There was a New York Times article like a couple of days ago. I don't know if it's true or not, but polling all over South America, country to country, and polls showed that people are very pleased with Maduro being out. So I just saw your comment.
Polls?
It was a New York Times article about 5 days ago, but I was just surprised.
So what is your question, Luke?
That's your comment.
Oh, okay. Well,
all right.
We'll get to rebuttals in just a moment.
Okay, who else has a question? All right, then there's a
question, but I follow Latin American news every day, all day from different countries because I'm fluent in Spanish and English, and I've been paying attention to politics since the 1970s or 80s. So I can just say, like, when January 6th happened.
Could we give her a microphone because we can't hear her at home?
Come on up front.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
I was just gonna share, like.
Well, tell you what. Can you save it for rebuttal? Can you save it for rebuttal?
Yeah, we're gonna get a chance next.
I was just gonna say, like, January 6th, the joke was going around all of Latin America. No, because Democrats here said that Trump attempted a coup. And again, I'm not a Trump supporter, but the joke in Latin America was there could never be a coup in the United States because the U.S., Washington, D.C. does not have a U.S. embassy. So that kind of sums up, like, attitudes in Latin America. Like, what you see on American or British or European news is not typical of attitudes in Latin America.
Okay.
Right, thank you for that comment. We're going to move. First, I want to thank Stansfield for coming up and giving this presentation.
All right.
And I'm going to leave you with this question. I'm not expecting an answer tonight because I am the type of person that believes that if you're going to bring forth a problem, bring forth an adequate solution. So please think on that, find out what we can do about it. And if you'd like, you can share that in your rebuttal.
All right, go ahead and all right. Rebuttals are going to be about. I'll give everybody about 3 to 4 minutes.
All right. So rebuttals are about to start, as Tim had mentioned.
Why don't you ask how many people?
How many we get in line?
What?
How many people want to give rebuttals?
We're just going to start rebuttals. I got a count here. Don't worry.
Why don't we ask how many?
Well, if you quit interrupting, we could go through. All right, go ahead.
Okay, we're going to limit the rebuttals to 3 minutes.
3 to 4 minutes.
For right now, we're going to say 3 minutes. If we go over, we'll give a little alibi. Who here has a rebuttal that they'd like to share?
Yeah.
And Tim is going to keep an eye on our.
Who else has a rebuttal to share? Okay, who else?
Everybody. Ellie does. There's a lot of newcomers.
Get up there for 5 minutes.
It's rebuttal. What would be appropriate and how long? Because I want to encourage people to speak. We've got people here.
We were just covering that, Ellen. So we're gonna start with 3 minutes maximum, just 3 minutes. If we go over, we'll have a little alibi, but we're trying to keep it short so that everybody has an opportunity to talk. So we're gonna start with 3 minutes, and Ellen, we'll let you take the lead on that one.
Yeah.
Tim is gonna monitor our online presence for any of rebuttals on that end.
Okay, we got two already, but we'll move on.
Okay.
I'm gonna go.
Thank you, Stansfield. We were just saying at the table that that's one of the best ones we've had here in a long time, mainly because it was totally informed, accurate, true, relevant to the problems we face today. And that's why I want to keep this thing going. We need, we celebrated 75 years last couple of weeks ago. And we can't just say that we don't have enough speakers. There's not enough topics. We're in a crisis of civilization, but it comes down to a very simple thing. What you just said was, our problems of our own making. Our government is strategically dividing and conquering us and everybody else in the world by invading them and, trying to pit the rich so the rich get richer and the poor die, and that's this war on communism that has to stop, right? It's such a simple idea. Why don't we stop the war on communism? And, it started with the Cold War, 1948, which was 1984, what George Orwell was writing about. And this is exactly what we have. We are living 1984. The military, the journalists are just putting things in the memory hole. It was planned by James Burnham in the 30s. The Council on Foreign Relations, it's the manager's revolution. It's really the counter-revolution on the whole world. They actually they orchestrated World War II. Let's pit Germany, the fascists, or make it look like communism versus democracy, the Axis versus the Allies. This whole thing has been made up so that the oligarchs, the Nazi fascists could win. And that's what we've got. We're smart. We can see it. We've got the internet. But how can we stop it? I've been asking this question for 10 years. You can go back and look at my archive. It's like, what's the deep state? It's not public. It's the private. They privatize. It's a perfect crime to take over the banker at the very top, the Bank of International Settlements. Okay, well, it's time's up. I'll come back if nobody else has anything to say. And how about I'll give a talk at that Valentine's Day, okay? Because I have some answers to this.
Thank you, Ellen.
All right.
All right, online, it looks like we've got Kelvin up, and then we'll have Carly, and then we'll search the room again. So, Kelvin, you're up. Yep, unmute.
Yeah.
There you are.
Okay, like so many speakers and people that rail against American aggression, and I don't argue with you on that. The problem is that you see the world in terms of black hats and white hats, and if one person is wearing a black hat, then it means that the other side must de facto be wearing a white hat. You see this in Israel when people quite rightly campaign about the genocide that the Israeli government has perpetrated in Gaza. But then they spoil their argument by saying, well, Hamas are a great thing. I mean, I've seen the funniest thing I saw was a campus protest where they had lesbians for Hamas. Like those lesbians would last 5 minutes in Gaza without being covered in a pile of stones, right? And you spoil your arguments when you extol the virtue of sovereignty of a nation, of Venezuela, and you say that Ukraine's sovereignty is not worth a carrot because look what NATO made Putin do. He made them, and he made Putin invade. He made him bomb Kiev. He made it to this. He made him, and he had to say, "Wow, it was because of NATO expansion." Well, how's that worked out for Mr. Putin? Hey, Finland has joined NATO. Every other NATO country is up their ante by about 5 times. Right? He's never faced a bigger threat from NATO than this one. And why hasn't he invaded other countries? Well, maybe because he's losing 1,000 troops a month in the Donbass region. That's why he hasn't invaded other countries. And if you don't believe me, listen to Mr. Putin himself. Russia is everywhere a Russian soldier puts his boots. That's exactly what he said, right? So don't be coming on here and saying, "Oh, Ukraine was a whole media, CIA organized, going back by the deep state," and saying it's wrong to invade Venezuela. Yes, it's wrong to invade Venezuela. But if you can't get behind another sovereign nation when they're fighting for their fucking life, what good are you?
All right. Well, thank you, Kelly.
All right.
And I told Charlie he was going to be up next.
Okay, Charlie, go ahead. Let me get that.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank our speaker, Stansfield. It was an excellent presentation, and you covered a lot of diverse areas. I'm sorry for the disorder at times. I apologize. But my only comment this evening is I thought the United States, and I don't know the details of it, something called the War Powers Act, and the use of the U.S. military overseas, and they have been in combative situations. I don't understand precisely how Trump, the president of the United States, can unilaterally, apparently, decide to do any sort of military activity without the knowledge and concurrence of the U.S. Congress. I realize the War Powers Act perhaps was an enabling piece of legislation. However, isn't the president confined to what they can do in terms of foreign affairs and use specifically of the U.S. military? I believe Trump has far exceeded his authority in this regard, and this is an impeachable offense. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Charlie.
We have Ernie online too. You want to go next, Ernie?
Yeah, I can go now if you want me to. A few comments here. Stan, I as always, your talk is very, very good. I don't necessarily agree with all the things.
1 second, Ernie. I'm going to pause your time. One fool at a time, please.
Okay.
Right, please continue.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I good presentation as usual, and I hope you'll do it often in the future, and you'll keep me on your mailing list for any other places that you're going, because you give other good presentations as well. But I don't agree with you on a lot of things. First of all, I believe the UN and several other organizations, international organizations, say that Maduro lost the last election, and I thought I heard you say that Maduro actually won the election and it was stolen. In your final remarks, I'd like to know what the story is on that. There's a fellow that I have heard in a couple of places, Eric Mao's group and also David Ramsey Steele's group. His name is Martinez, and I don't remember his first name, but he's from Venezuela, and he states that he very badly wants to go back to Venezuela, as do most Venezuelans that are here, but they don't want to go back until Maduro is gone. Now, whether they'll go back now or not, I don't know. But he gave an excellent presentation on Venezuela at David Ramsey Steele's group, or what I thought it was a very good presentation. Anyway, I don't know if you're familiar with this fellow, Stan, but if you aren't, you probably ought to get together. You wouldn't agree, but you could compare notes. Also, my son dated a lady from Venezuela. She and all the people she knows from Venezuela want to go back. But again, not while Maduro's there. Now he's gone. I don't know how they feel about that. A couple other minor comments to Ellen. There's not a war on communism going on in this country. There are there are several wars. One of them is liberals fighting conservatives, and then there's the conservatives fighting liberals. But it's not a war on communism. We're in a very interesting and unstable state in this country now with regard to our politics. And I'm waiting for November. Hopefully that will settle things a little bit. And I must admit, I have lost respect for Machado. I think she and her group did win the election, but I lost a lot of respect for her when she played that little coy game of giving Donald Trump her Nobel Prize. The Nobel Committee, one thing they don't have is a vehicle for taking prizes back. And there are a few cases where that might have been appropriate, and in this case it might be. I have no respect for her, even as a joke, saying that she's going to give her Nobel Prize to Donald Trump. And God forbid that the Nobel Committee should ever actually give him a Nobel Prize. One last note. I'm going to reiterate my Helsinki theory here, which I've said many times, which is very simply that Putin and Trump, when they met in Helsinki several years ago during Trump's first term, I think they made a deal. Trump and the U.S. get the Western Hemisphere. Putin gets Europe, and Xi, even though he wasn't in the meeting, gets Asia. I have seen no substantive evidence since then, and lots of little pieces of evidence that this theory might be true. And Ukraine, Ukraine is Europe, so that's why we aren't supporting them very much, because that belongs to Putin, according to that agreement. And we get Venezuela. So what we do in Venezuela, the Russians don't care. They make statements that they care either way, but they don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie.
Okay, Jake, you were up there. You wanted to make a comment?
Just say something.
Okay.
Jake?
Ask questions, clarify.
Jake,
Hello?
you want go ahead. You're on, Jake. You're on, Jake. Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Ernie there. I have problems with Machado trying to give away her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump. So did the Nobel Committee. They said we don't allow for this kind of thing. I think she was just trying to buy over Donald Trump so that he could install her in the presidency. But yes, I am in agreement with Ernie that in fact I think Machado did win the election. The fact that the Venezuelan Supreme Court ruled against her, I think is very suspicious. And again, it's a question of who controls the Supreme Court of country of Venezuela. My understanding is that Maduro lost that election to Machado by what percentage point I don't know, and he somehow skewed the election results. Remember, the executive branch there is in control of the election process, as far as I'm concerned. So, anyway, the reason that Trump smeared her at the end was, smear is the wrong word. He didn't allow her to take power is not because she's not popular, but rather because he felt that she wasn't capable of running the country. This is what he said publicly. And I suspect probably because she won her Nobel Peace Prize for supporting human rights, which he does not support. So it's a very ambiguous kind of situation there. But no, I don't think it has anything to do with popularity. And if she was the legitimate winner of that election, then she should have been installed as president, and not Maduro, regardless of what we say. All right, that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, I want to go next. I got a little bit of a longer rebuttal, but I think it'll be very pertinent tonight.
You get to go on longer?
I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes.
I appreciate that.
Equal
Well-
protections before the law.
My point of the matter is this. What exactly is democracy?
Okay, hold on.
Democracy is often treated like an inheritance, like something we receive automatically and it will always be there. We talk about democracy as if it were a possession rather than a responsibility. But history and every moral tradition represented in this room tells us something different. Democracy is something we have. Democracy is something we practice. And like any moral practice, it weakens or neglected and strengthens upon when people recommitted to it together. More than 2,000 years ago, Plato recognized what happens when we stop having our democracy and try to pursue it and be involved in it. Plato recognized this danger with extraordinary clarity. In the Republic, Plato did not begin with elections or institutions. He began with the human soul. Plato argued that society cannot remain free if people stop practicing self-government in their own lives. When desire replaces discipline and impulses replace reason, freedoms begin to collapse from within. Plato warned us directly. Excessive liberty, whether in states or individuals, seems to pass into excessive slavery. Plato was not defending and attacking freedom. He was defending it. Freedom without self-restraint creates chaos, and chaos produces the demand for control. Plato was not anti-democracy. He was demanding mature leadership. What makes Plato's warning so powerful is that not stand alone. In the Jewish tradition, the book of Proverbs teaches righteousness exalts a nation, but wrongdoing brings a people low. In Christianity, the apostle writes in Galatians, you were called to freedom, but your freedom as an opportunity, but do not use your freedom as this opportunity for self-indulgence. Let's go into what the Quran teaches about this stuff. God does not change the condition of a people until they change it within themselves. This principle continues to guide Muslims working for immigrant rights, racial justice, and humanitarian relief. In the Hindu philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita teaches that true freedom is self-mastery, not indulgence. A person ruled by impulse is not free. In Confucius taught that harmony in a state begins with the integrity of the individual. Social order flows outward from character to family to community to government. And it takes moral courage. This is why moral leaders have always warned that injustice advances fastest, not when bad people gain power, but when good people step back. Fulton Sheen, a televangelist of about 30 years ago, who died in 1979, who was on the radio in the 50s and 60s, put it well. A civilization is not destroyed by wicked people. It is destroyed by people who tolerate wickedness. This frequently appears too in the teaching of Pope Leo the 13th, who warned against confusing freedom with impulse. Liberty is not the power to do what we like, but the right to do what we ought. Rights without duties weaken freedom. Justice has always required strength. Let's look at our modern stress test on this. The rise of Donald Trump was not a historical accident. It was a stress test, not just of institutions, but of citizens itself. Trump revealed how fragile democracy becomes when loyalty replaces consciousness, personality replaces principle, and frustration replaces participation. Democracies do not collapse when people argue passionately. It collapses when people stop holding their own side accountable. This lesson far more matters than any single election. Let's go on a little further. When the Constitutional Convention ended, Benjamin Franklin answered a simple question with a profound warning. A republic, if you can keep it. The word if really matters. It means freedom is not guaranteed. It means democracy is not conditional. It means citizens, like yourselves, are ultimately responsible. Ronald Reagan echoed the same truth. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handled on. Every generation must renew democracy by itself. And to be honest with you, it requires citizens who defend truth when misinformation spreads faster than facts. It requires conditions across belief, race, and background, because justice has never been won alone. Democracy does not lean towards justice by itself. It leans towards justice only when people lean on it. Here is a hopeful truth shared across every tradition I've spoken about tonight. Renewal is always possible, not because leaders become better, but because people decide to become better. Democracy is not finished. It is not doomed. It is not waiting for better leaders. It is waiting for us. It is a moral practice and the time to practice it together is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That actually went 6 minutes. I've got time for one more rebuttal.
It's 7:10, right?
Oh, we still have closing arguments. Still have closing arguments as well.
Tim, do you have a copy for you?
We've got.
We got a few minutes so we can take more rebuttals now.
Addition, if you want.
Yeah, come on up.
Somebody.
Yeah, come on up and say what you need to say.
I think this gentleman was talking about the
Introduce yourself, please.
Latin American community.
Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Ellie Marino. He was talking about Latin American communities in the U.S. and I've lived with them my whole adult life. So people who come generally from Latin America or much of the world that's poor, they're coming for economic reasons usually, right? And unless they're, the very wealthy Latin Americans, the elite, they just come for weekends to shop in Miami generally, right? And my daughter is Mexican, for example. Maybe that country's less so. Some countries have very much smaller even percentage of elite and much more poor, and it's more racially segregated. So anyway, every Latin American country is a little different, but when there are countries that have had revolutions or changes of government that the US government or empire does not approve of, there's a special dynamic. And the case of Cuba is the oldest, right? And it's true of other countries in the world, like during the Cold War, right? Russian immigrants and refuseniks and all that stuff. But the US government and intelligence agencies, state, whatever branches of the government, I mean, the Congress too, they pass laws that put these people in special categories. So they get privileges here that other immigrants don't. And like the case I know, Latin Americans, for example, people used to say to me 30 years ago, why do you like Cubans? They're kind of nasty. They're not nice to people. We Puerto Ricans, we Colombians here, like they're bosses and they treat people bad and they pay them less than minimum. I said, wait, that's Cubans who live in Florida, right? In the 1990s. That's not the same as Cubans on the island. Like just in general, people who leave their country probably are not representative of, right, the people that live still in those countries. But in this case, a lot of bad economic times do get a lot of people to leave. It's always been true. It's been true for Mexico. But then what happens once they're here, even if, like, say, many Cubans who have come the revolution period was extra, conflictive, and it was mostly like rich, privileged people that came or were scared of communism. Right? But after the Mariel boat lift in the early 80s, like we started getting just Cubans that were economic refugees mostly, besides some crazy political incidents, right? With Mario, they're just coming for economic reasons. So if most of them, like most people, are apolitical, they come here, they're like, oh yeah, economic times were bad there. I just need to get a job. I got an uncle here. He's going to help me. But what happens is after a few weeks, even, I've seen these people, like, you just talk to them at the next party you see them at, and now it's, oh no, yeah, I'm here because of communism, I'm safe here. This is great, freedom. What happens is, like, in order to get jobs from rich people in their communities, they have to change their tune. And the more they speak against their home government, the more doors open to them. So it's a whole dynamic that just, it creates a special culture here for the diaspora from people from countries that the U.S. government does not approve of. So does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Colin, are you going to come up with a rebuttal?
Yeah, come on, Colin.
And then I've got,
Get up there.
Everybody, yeah.
I've got one more rebuttal after him.
We've got till 8 o'clock.
Oh, but we gotta leave we got another 20, 30 minutes yet, so.
Oh, we also have closing.
Yeah, I know, and then the closing remarks.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. So the overall talk tonight was kind of about the lack of justification to invade Venezuela because of, we talked about the quality of democracy in Venezuela and the goodness that these governments have brought to its people. Maybe the news can't be trusted against that theory. But the next best thing is talking to the Venezuelans themselves and Nicolás Maduro, what he said online, what he said publicly, and they're not benevolent victims here. I know you said the Venezuelan, you retorted back when I said that the Venezuelans would not buy that the Venezuelan government are the benevolent victims. But those aren't just Venezuelans that I've talked to in the US. I actually helped relocate a lot of Venezuelans. I gave loans to people who are trying to escape. So I know people in Venezuela and I know people who are Venezuelans who are living here.
Yeah, so do I. I have the bed too.
One at a time.
Okay. But anyway, about the quality of services, any benefit that Venezuela has had has just been because they've been spending oil money like a kid in a candy shop. It's not because of competent civil servants. For Cuba, for example, they don't have electricity. Venezuelan hospitals don't have bed sheets. So, and Cuba is an importer of sugar. That's the one industry that they should be self-sufficient in, that doesn't require US technology or European technology or Western technology. They can't even be self-sufficient in sugar. They import that. Which goes to show further incompetence in government, not US interference. And further point on economic mismanagement, there's so many videos of Hugo Chavez standing on the corner being like, there's tons of videos out there saying, expropriate that business, and asking his officials, what is that business over there? Oh, it's a jewelry store. Expropriate it. That laptop maker, who made that? Expropriate the manufacturer. That's no way to run an economy. That's pretty good proof that they had their hand in it as well as the U.S. The U.S. blockade did hurt Venezuela, but it was also very much of their own making. And so, touching on democracy, you can't understand Venezuelan democracy without understanding La Lista de Tascón and how much that impacted the people in the country. because it wasn't an isolated event where, you know, there were a couple thousands of people who were affected, because I think millions of people signed that petition to get Hugo Chavez removed. And those were people that got denied healthcare. They got denied housing. They got denied public jobs. That is not a democracy that can be trusted. And we know this to be true because there are so many refugee cases, not just in Western countries. Colombia, Argentina, Uruguay. Uruguay is an ally of Venezuela in many cases, and they have their own refugee cases saying that we were targeted by this friendly government. And another point here about the refugees, the decline the diaspora of Venezuelans started before the embargo. That statistic of the 30% poverty rate, I don't know if I can believe that poverty went from 3% in the country to 30%. Maybe that's a legitimate statistic, but if it came out of Venezuela and their government, I wouldn't believe it. Once Hugo Chavez got elected, and when they knew he was on the way to being elected, the many classes of Venezuelans were leaving because they were reading the writing on the wall. The professionals, the educated, people who spoke a second language, people who could get news from outside the country, they saw an economic crisis unfolding of their own making, and they were moving as soon as they could, if they had the resources to. It had nothing to do with the economic blockade. And then the last point here I'll make is, I said, maybe we can't trust the news, maybe we can't trust even the Venezuelans themselves, but we can trust what Maduro has said himself. A year ago, Venezuela was talking about invading Guyana, just the way that we have invaded Venezuela to take out their leader, because Guyana had found a ton of oil and Venezuela was going to go in, and they were talking about putting tanks on the border and rolling into Guyana. So this is not a benevolent government. That is a government of humanity. So my point here is that although it's not right for the U.S. to meddle in these other countries, the U.S. did not destabilize Venezuela in the way that it's being portrayed. And Venezuela was not just minding its business, as it's been claimed tonight. You know, the diaspora has been a disaster of its own making, and the things with Guyana are further proof of that. So.
Okay, we have somebody online. Jen, go ahead. Jen, go.
Yeah, I wanted to just, this will not be a rebuttal. It's just a couple of comments. I believe he said that Cuba imports its sugar, and that is a sign that the government is not well run or something. And it turns out that my very first action when I first became a lefty, if you want to put it that way, was down in Decatur, where they were, where the people were working for UNI Sugar, I think it was, or the other company, sugar company. They were striking against their, bosses because they were getting sick because of the chemicals and the carelessness of the processing of sugar in that factory. And if you look at sugar, it's killed more people than the atomic bomb, because it started in the 1600s with importing slaves, and the slaves died like flies on the coming across. In the sugar fields, they were overheated and they died. They cut themselves with these enormous sharp contraptions, and they were children. And from there on, you go into sugar, and sugar is the cause of an enormous amount of human disease. I think Dennis is my friend in talking about this. We sort of share our hatred of what sugar does to people. So my opinion would be about Cuba importing sugar instead of manufacturing it itself is that the process of manufacturing sugar is well, it's something that is not good. And so if Cuba imports sugar, it's because they don't want to pay people minimum wage. They don't want to see people getting themselves cut up in the sugar fields. They don't want to do the process of having their sugar workers get sick because of bad chemicals. And so they import sugar because they don't want to manufacture it themselves. It is not something that fits into their economy. And then I had one other question about Venezuelan oil. I want to say everybody. It's not truly everybody. It's just in my email because I sort of live in I live in an echo chamber of lefty opinions. And they say that the Venezuelan oil is so inaccessible that it's a lot like the oil up in Alberta, that it's very thick and heavy. It's at a place that is not easily accessible. And to take advantage of Venezuelan oil, there would have to be an awful lot of the investment, either by our government or by VCs or oil companies, that they want to invest in accessing this oil, refining it, and that it's not only inaccessible geologically, but it's very, very thick, and the refinement process is extremely difficult. And so the idea that we invaded Venezuela for the oil is only a fiction, that because we can't really use their oil.
Thank you for your rebuttal there. We've got one person waiting here in queue.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Everybody speaks.
This is the first time I've been here in maybe 15 or 20 years. I must say it's a pleasure, and it's just wonderful to see people discussing, I don't know whether they're opinions or facts.
Please,
and I would kind of like if people would, if we would all could try to move toward factual material.
Please introduce
I was
yourself.
mostly touched by your points here.
Introduce yourself real quick, if you don't.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. My name is Chris Fogarty. My wife, Mary, is here also. We've been involved in different things for years, been arrested by the police many times, and in fact, assaulted by them. But that's during our anti-war efforts. That came after our years of working on bringing some truth regarding the so-called potato famine. But to say with what we're doing here, these words we heard about national virtue, I think, are very, very important. I think this was a wonderful talk tonight about individual virtue helping to make a nation virtuous. Except that, and here's my rebuttal, and it's a very tragic one, seeing that two of our presidents have been Epsteined, and all of our congressmen and our two senators, U.S. senators from the state of Illinois, have been APAC'd, with the exception of Congresswoman Delia Ramirez and Chuy Garcia. All the rest are owned by our enemies. Our enemies are the people for whom we've gone to war for the last 30 years. And regarding, by the way, I worked in Venezuela for a while on the Guri Dam, and also worked in what was then British Guyana on the Berbice River, upstream the Berbice River, on another project, civil engineer. But we have a special tragedy in the United States. where even individual virtue is in a box. We are caged. The American people are caged by our enemies. Our enemies are those who created the neocons. They used to be Trotskyites, and they adopted a false conservatism to win over the GOP. They did that, and all of our wars since 1999, the bombing of Serbia, and from then on, all those wars have been neocon wars. And according to Jeffrey Sachs, and you might all remember when General Wesley Clark on television described his bemused reception of the news from the Pentagon that we were going to have invade 7 nations in 5 years. And more recently, the world has been told by Jeremy Sachs, and I tend to believe him. I think he speaks the truth. We have to keep studying things, but he said that the orders to the Pentagon that became our national policy came from Netanyahu. So we are in a box, and AIPAC now controls our country, and I don't know how personal virtue can overcome the problem we have and make America America again.
Okay, all right, Stan, you got final remarks.
Wait, I've got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
And then Stan, you're on deck.
So I want to say that I take something very different from Stan's information than what Colin took from it. I don't see Stan's presentation equating any observations of statistical facts around Latin America in terms of economic development and changes and the impacts of sanctions or virtue. I think what Stan was trying to headline here is that sanctions, especially unilateral sanctions that the U.S. uses, according to the UN, are illegal. That's what the international law says. And it does cause great devastation. And I think I heard Colin say that he questions the impacts of sanctions on countries. And just for the sake of offering some resources to you, Colin, you might want to check out the Center for Economic and Policy Research. On January 14th, they published some really interesting historical research about the impact of economic sanctions around the world to give you an idea of just how devastating these sanctions are. And I wanted to just also add that the U.S. has 800, at least it's estimated, 800 military bases around the world. So in addition to having the strengths of economic sanctions, there's the military threats that are being posed and imposed on other countries. And it's not a point of who's more moral and who's not. It's which country has the power, and we're empire. And then channeling Michael Parenti, I just like to add by saying he was known to have said at one point, he said, there's no such thing as poor countries. All countries have wealth. That's why they're human beings there, because they found a way to create a society that works. What happens is we have poor countries because the rich countries are making those countries poor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome back to the podium Stansfield Smith for our closing remarks.
Stan, try to keep it under 10 minutes, okay?
Yeah. No problem.
You're on the clock.
That's united.
I noticed that Americans have this manifest destiny idea, not only the government and the leaders, but the average American, that we know what you and your country should do to make your lives better, and we know better than you, and we're going to have you do what we want you to do. I hear that over and over and over tonight. That's manifest destiny, that we as chosen by God to bring the world to civilization and democracy. And I would think you should go back, or I go back, we should go back and remember what Jesus said about don't talk about the splinter in someone else's eye until you remove the log from your own. I wouldn't be complaining about what's happening in Venezuela or other countries when we have all these. I mean, I had my heat out in my house for 3 days. It's like we have all these homeless people out here freezing to death. What are we doing about it? You can't come here and talk about human rights in Venezuela. What are you doing about people freezing? We don't even know how many people freeze to death on the streets. It's not even an issue for us. But what's going on in Venezuela, we can get all upset about it. But what are we doing for these other American people here? We should be doing these things for people here, not bothering with what's going on in other countries. That's for people in those countries to solve their problems. I would agree with people like Ron Paul or Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Trump in his first campaign for president when he said we should get out of intervening in other countries and take care of our own. I mean, now Trump does the exact opposite of that. He's like outdoing Obama and Biden, but there are good examples. People like Ron Paul, and they're saying it's not our business what people in other countries do. We should take care of people here. Now about this, since you're going on and on about people about Ukraine, I'll just say John Mersheimer is a University of Chicago professor who is a graduate from West Point. He served in Vietnam. He's, I don't know how many prizes he's got, but he gave a speech in, I think, 2015 about what the U.S. was doing in Ukraine was going to lead to a war with Russia. This was years before the war started. He made a speech saying going this way is going to give Russia, like, they have a red line and U.S. is crossing it and it's going to end up in a war. He's made numerous speeches about Ukraine since then in Russia. But you don't want to listen to me about it, go listen to John Mersheimer and you can write to him about your complaints about what he says. I'd like to also say I said nothing about benevolent victims. I said nothing about the leaders of these countries being benevolent or anything. I'm just talking about things, rights, human rights that they have that we do not have when we could easily provide it. Since some of you talked about Maria Corina Machado, there were 8 and I think 9 opposition parties who ran in that election. Not one of the other opposition parties could corroborate the statistics that Machado gave, saying that she won 70% of the vote. These were opposition parties against Maduro. They could not substantiate what she was saying about the election. And I would remind all during the last year, she has called for the U.S. to invade Venezuela. Then she was given the Nobel Peace Prize. And then she went to the White House to give the Nobel Peace Prize to the person who invaded her country. Now, what kind of popularity do you think she's going to have? If you can imagine that Martin Luther King won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he said, United States is such a rotten, racist country, and it's all this apartheid in this country. I want would have been Brezhnev at the time to bomb Washington. You think that's something that a Nobel Peace Prize, that's what this person does. She's just totally not credible. And she's also discredited among the other opposition people. About Guyana, Guyana's been a source of dispute between the British Guyana and Venezuela since I think 1897 or 1898 about this part of the Essequibo, who's the proper owner of this land, has never been resolved, and it's not resolved to this date. I think right now Guyana is invited in Exxon to extract oil from that territory, but that is not. There's been no final decision about who that territory belongs to. Yeah. I guess that's the most, what I would say. But the most, I think, if we want to how to build some kind of national anti-intervention movements and redirect funds for meeting the needs of the people in this country and not spending it on wars, we're not going to get anywhere so long as we think it's our business to decide what other leaders in other countries are doing in their countries. That is only going to lead to war. That's going to continue on the same path we are now of just constant war. Unless we have to start getting away from that kind of thinking, and it's like, we'll take care of people in our country and let the people in other countries, they decide their own fate. That's what it means to be a sovereign country. Okay, I would also like to apologize to some of you who maybe I was not so nice to.
That's all right. Thank you. Close us out, sir.
Right. Thank you, Stansfield. I appreciate not only your presentation, but your closing remarks there. Before we take off, I want to thank everyone that joined us online, especially a shout out to Charlie and, of course, Tim for facilitating this. Those that are present here, I ask if you haven't done so already, to please take care of Miss Erica. She sweats it out to make certain that we have a place to be, and she makes certain we're all fed. With that, any other remarks, Tim?
No, that's it. We'll adjourn the meeting and
give a big hand to Stan.
Yeah.
And remember, the college complexes will convene 1 week from today, but the vehicles for change don't have the itinerary right in front of me, but I do know that should be a very good presentation and should bring up some lively debate. So with that, we are now adjourned.
Okay.